Hello, I'm Harry Cole, political editor of The Sun, and this is Never Mind The Ballots. With the government battling away sleaze allegations and Downing Street dysfunction, on the other side of the aisle, the Tory leadership election has exploded. After the shock departure of James Cleverly from the race, we're joined by the man who was once the frontrunner, but now the bookies have him as the underdog. Welcome back to Never Mind The Ballots, Robert Jenrick.
Good to be here, Harry.
What happened yesterday? What was crazy shenanigans were going on behind the scenes?
There's always horse trading in these situations, but I'm just pleased in the privacy of the ballot box. My colleagues put me through into the final two.
Were your team playing silly buggers, trying to knock out Kemi or Cleverly, lending votes?
No, not at all.
None of it? Really?
Not at all. I think you've seen how hard I've worked over the summer. I've done 150 events. I've been to all four nations of the UK. We've just worked to get the confidence of as many Conservative MPs as we possibly can.
But you haven't got the confidence of a majority of the Conservative MPs, nowhere near it. In fact, two-thirds of Tory MPs.
No, none of the three candidates.
Well, but that's a problem, though, isn't it? Because we saw with Boris Johnson, we saw with Liz Truss, what happens when the herd moves, so to speak. Even if you win, or Kemi wins, you're going to come in, the leader of the new party is going to come in with two-thirds of the MPs opposing them. How are you going to fix that?
Well, look, I think my nature is one to heal the party and bring people back together. We've got to end all this disunity that's given the party a bad name. It's one of the reasons why we've lost the trust and the confidence of the public. I think you do that by having a leader who can work with people from all wings of the party, as is seen by some of my supporters in this election, but by also using this leadership election to settle some of the big questions facing our party and our country. Let's not mess around. Let's come to conclusions and unite around this. For example, whether we should remain within the European Convention on Human Rights. I'm very clear. We will never end illegal migration. We'll never get the terrorists and the foreign criminals off our streets, out of our country, unless we do that. I want us to have clear policies, not platitudes. That's what I stand for.
On that, though, so let's just take that one example. It's your headline sort of flagship policy to leave the ECHR without a referendum. Just do it, make it party policy, make it happen. Will you require, should you win, every single member of your shadow cabinet to agree to that before you give them a job?
Well, I want to use this leadership election to have a mandate for that. So the membership will, I hope, support me in this because they understand how important it is to get a grip on this, and then it will be added to the stable of Conservative Party policies.
But would you allow, your shadow cabinet members not to sign up to that flagship issue and serve in your team?
Well, I want a broad church, but we've got to have a common creed. We've got to have a sense of what does the party actually believe in, and that would be one of our party's policies, absolutely. So if we win the next election, we do it on a manifesto that commits to that. And so anyone who stands at that election obviously would be supporting that policy.
So every candidate at the 2029 election, or whatever it's going to be, would have to sign up to the Jenrick mantra of leave the ECHR.
Yeah, it will be one of our policies at that election.
Well, that's going to be an issue, though, isn't it? Because lots of your MPs, your colleagues, don't want to leave the ECHR. In fact, they did quite a lot, it seems, yesterday to try and stop you going through to the members' votes purely on that issue, that they don't want to have this fight.
Well, firstly, I don't agree with that. I think that there is now a growing consensus that the ECHR is just not working in the interests of the British people. You see that now. By even my opponents in this contest have said that we need to reform it. My point is that reform is impossible. In fact, it's a fantasy. There's 46 member states, from Andorra to Iceland to Turkey. You're never going to get agreement between them all as to what we should do to fix this. So you've got to leave. It's leave or remain. I'm for leave. I hope that this leadership election will give us the mandate to do that. We'll settle the issue and then we'll get over this migration issue, the running sore of British politics, and talk about all the other things we care about, the NHS, education, how we can get homes built for young people, how we can get real growth going again in our economy.
Isn't the problem, though, that this debate is going to suck the life out of your entire tenure, possible tenure as leader of the opposition? Just look at the reaction already to comments you made about special forces, comments you've made about terrorists coming into this country. The opponents of your policy, the defenders of the ECHR, ranging from the legal establishment through to the BBC and their cheerleaders along the way, and the Guardian and left, right and centre, it's going to suck the life out of being able to do any of the other things you want to talk about, isn't it?
I think the opposite is true. I think if you do not have clear policies like I have, if you're just talking in platitudes and saying, well, we'll have a plan in months or years to come, that is a recipe for division. That is how you end up with disunity continuing, and we continue to lose the trust and the confidence of the British public. What I want to do is settle this issue now, use this leadership election to come to a decision, and then move on and talk about all the other things that we actually care about as a party. And why does it actually matter? Well, because I am not prepared to be a leader of this party and, frankly, a prime minister of this country who allows terrorists to roam our streets, who allows foreign murderers, criminals, paedophiles to be out and about on our streets. I'm not prepared to allow illegal migration to continue. We have to end this. And the only way to do that is to leave the ECHR. So we've just got to bite the bullet.
Your opponents say it's a too simplistic policy and it's just about grabbing headlines rather than actually ever being physically possible to do. It puts into jeopardy the Good Friday Agreement. It's going to put us on a collision course with various other treaties that we've signed.
Well, I would dispute that, Harry. I've given this a great deal of thought.
Have you?
I've spoken to
a couple of lawyers.
I've spoken to most of the interior and immigration ministers of Europe. I've spoken to some of our leading lawyers, like Lord Jonathan Sumption, who makes the argument powerfully to leave. I'm proposing we replace it with a British Bill of Rights. I think the country of habeas corpus...
tried that, didn't he? And it didn't work.
No, very different. The reason why it didn't succeed in the past was because we decided to do it whilst remaining within the ECHR. What you should ask my opponents is, what is their plan? What is their plan? How would they reform this? I've not heard anybody put forward a credible plan as to how this could be reformed, because there isn't one. There's no consensus. It would take decades. It would be as doomed to fail as David Cameron's attempt to renegotiate our membership of the EU. I'm not prepared to do that. Let's not mess around. Let's get on. Let's secure our borders.
You say let's not mess around. So just to be clear, on that point of leaving the ECHR as your flagship policy, to stand as a Tory candidate under a Jenrick leadership at the next election, you've got to be fully on board with that.
I'm saying it will be in our manifesto. So, yeah, when you stand as a candidate, you sign up to the manifesto.
So you'll be prepared to do what Dom Cummings and Boris did when basically kick out large parts of the Conservative Party.
I want the party to come together and to unite around this. And I think that's possible. You see that from the range of people who are supporting me within the parliamentary party. And you'll see it, I hope, when you see the members across the country coming to support me. But if the Conservative Party does not stand for fixing our borders, as frankly we did not do when we were in office, our party has no future. So let's all be clear about this. Reform will eat our lunch. And parties on the extreme right will rise up, causing harm that I don't want to see in this country. The future of the Conservative Party is staked upon having an answer to this central problem, amongst others.
One of the issues that MPs raised, I think both privately and publicly eventually in the course of this incredibly long leadership campaign, is that they just don't quite believe you when you say, you're saying all the right things to try and appeal to the right, to try new to reform, but they look at your career and say, well, who's the new guy? How do you worry that some of the support that you didn't get from MPs is simply that they're just not buying this?
No, I don't know who you're talking to, Harry, but look at the people who did support me. If you're asking about, would Brexit be safe in my hands? Well, why is Bill Cash and Mark Francois, why are some of, like David Frost, our chief negotiator on Brexit, why are they supporting me? The people who are supporting me know that I have a very clear plan. I don't talk in platitudes. I speak the truth and lay out the trade-offs on each of these issues. They have confidence that if I was the leader of this party, we would grapple with the serious challenges facing this country. And I'd do it with professionalism and competence. An end to the disunity, not Conservative Party as a Twitter account, but Conservative Party as governing this country.
You, in a speech this morning, you said you're going to end the drama, you're going to end the needless chaos and won't be fighting on Twitter. That's a drive-by on your opponent, isn't it? Kemi Badenoch?
I think it applies to the party more generally. Look, if you asked members of the public what they thought of our party in recent months and years, they would say we were disunited. There was squabbling, there was pettiness.
This is squabbling, though, isn't it? Accusing her of fighting on Twitter and being a drama candidate.
I want to end that. I want to heal the party. I want to bring it back together as a single, united, coherent force. To do that, though, you have to have a plan. I have a plan, not just on immigration, but how we get our public services up to scratch, how we can ensure the bad managers in the NHS are kicked out and the good ones are empowered, how we get real growth going again in our economy with cheap, reliable energy, making sure our kids have real skills, not low-value degrees, how we build some homes and infrastructure in this country, how we spread opportunity to places like Wolverhampton and Newark, where I grew up and represent now. That is my plan. I deal in specific policies, and that's one of the reasons why people have resonated with my campaign.
We'll come back to that in a second, but just unclear on this. When you say you want to end the drama, you're talking about Kemi, aren't you? You think she's the drama candidate?
No, I'm talking about the whole party. The party has been characterised by disunity.
Well, we saw it last night. We saw it in the incredible amounts of bad blood.
Well, let's make this contest the end of that.
How are you really going to do that? You really think the Tory party is going to come together? I think two-thirds of them don't like you.
I think we can come together around a clear policy agenda. But you do that by instilling professionalism and competence into the party so the public can look at us again and think these people deserve to be in government. I want the Conservative Party, the oldest political party in the world, to once again be in government, not to just be sounding off, going down rabbit holes, being seen as a party of Twitter. That is not right. That is letting the party, but much more importantly, is letting the country down. The country needs a credible party of government.
Do you think Kemi Badenoch could do that?
Look, I can only ride my own horse in this, but when people look at me, see my record in government, see the way I conduct myself, I think they would say, this is someone who will provide sober, serious, competent leadership, but with conviction and courage, as they saw, for example, when I resigned from the government at the turn of the year. I have principles. I know where I stand on the big issues, but I also will deliver the competent government and leadership that the party needs.
Let's talk about your record in government. I've been leaked a letter. It was a letter that you wrote to Rishi Sunak. It's on this screen here if you want. It was just in the run-up in March 2023, in the run-up to a French Anglo summit, in which you wrote that Britain should be prepared to offer France to take one asylum seeker that's been successfully granted asylum in the French system in return for one illegal migrant that we return to them. You go on in the next paragraph to say, in fact, we should even pay the French to take part in this deal. This one-in, one-out system would be, as far as I can, from my reading of it, uncapped. It would see us basically opening our borders to asylum seekers. And you yourself acknowledge in the letter that the public will think this is nuts. Where's the getting real on migration in that? And isn't this just exactly the sort of thing that your colleagues fear, that you did one thing in government and you're saying something completely different now?
No, I completely reject that. This was an idea that was knocking around in government. It wasn't my idea, but it was one.
But you're backing it.
But it was one which was designed to be a very short time-limited intervention to break the business model of the people smuggling gangs, so there would be no incentive for anyone ever to come here illegally again. What was shameful about that incident was that, as I understand it, Rishi Sunak put it to President Macron and he rejected it. He wouldn't even give it a hearing because he didn't want to fix this problem, probably as a punishment for Brexit.
You agree with Boris Johnson on that Macron would?
I do. But Macron could still fix this problem tomorrow if he wanted to. But the French don't care. They could put police officers and gendarmes on the beaches of France.
They've got the drones. We're paying them millions of pounds a year to do that.
They're not doing it seriously. They're not arresting people. They could put buoys in the English Channel, like we're doing, some of our partners are doing elsewhere in the world, like the Texans are doing on the Rio Grande. They could turn back the boats in shallow waters, like the Belgians do for us, which has prevented almost all small boats leaving from Belgian beaches. The French could stop this tomorrow. They don't want to. And the reason for that is they're punishing us because of Brexit.
Well, on that issue, though, you talk about getting serious about migration and doing things. You talk about the trade-offs. Is that a Robert Jenrick plan that you would be happy to do? Would you reintroduce that idea if a different French president was in office?
What I learnt from that was that you cannot rely on the kindness of strangers to secure our borders. The French are not going to fix this problem for us. You've got to have a deterrent.
But in principle, you were up for paying the French. Let's look at this. Paying the French for us to take their successful asylum seekers.
Look, what you've got to do is have a deterrent. That was a way of having a deterrent. That if you turned up...
It doesn't sound like a deterrent. It sounds like an encouragement to get to France ASAP.
No. If you turned up in the UK, you'd be sent straight back to France. That's common sense. That would have stopped it immediately. But what I learnt from this is you cannot rely on the French. So what we've got to do is have a more credible deterrent. That's why I became so strongly in favour of Rwanda.
Yeah.
But you will only make these policies work if you leave the European Convention on Human Rights. Otherwise, it's a fantasy. You've got to do that. That's why I want to use this leadership election to settle that crucial issue.
Was there any other sort of madcap ideas of paying people for us to take asylum seekers in your time as immigration minister? What else is in the locker? I mean, this is just one leak letter. Is there any other?
Look, Harry, my record speaks for itself.
I know you resigned eventually, but you were there for a while.
I was there for a year. I'm the only minister to ever have reduced small boat arrivals. They dropped by over a third in my time. Soon as I left, rocketed straight up again. I got the number of people being deported out of our country up 8-fold in a year. And I fought relentlessly for the biggest changes to our legal migration system in our lifetimes. That will reduce the number of people coming here by around 300,000 a year. That will place hugely better prospects for our housing, our public services, for community cohesion in this country. And when I knew I couldn't do more, I resigned.
Right.
So that is my record in office. I could see that these issues mattered to the public, and I didn't want to be just another minister sat around that cabinet table making promises, knowing that I wouldn't keep them. And that is what the members of this party and the public know that they would get from me if I'm lucky enough to lead a principle.
Your opponent, Kemi Badenoch, you presumably put in that camp because she didn't.
Well, look, we all are responsible for our own choices. And I chose, when I knew I couldn't get more out of the Prime Minister, I chose to resign on a matter of principle. I was the only minister to do it in the last Parliament.
All the polls and all the surveys and everything show that Badenoch is the member's darling. She's ahead of you. In the runoff, she was predicted to win. How are you going to turn that around?
Well, look,
apart from little digs about her Twitter use.
If you had asked a few months ago, I was the rank outsider in this
You were the
contest.
favourite 2 weeks ago.
I was the rank outsider. We've made such progress. The momentum is obviously with me. There is a wind in our sails.
You went backwards in the third round, though, didn't you?
We have done so well in such a short period of time. Why am I prospering like that? Because my message is resonating with the membership and with the public. They want someone with a real plan, serious, specific policies to fix the big challenges facing this country, the NHS, immigration, the economy. They want an end of the drama. They want the Conservative Party to be a serious party again. That's what
are the odds of that happening? We've had 25 years of Tory drama, and they haven't been still talking about getting rid of Thatcher, for Christ's sake. How are you really, realistically going to turn it around in 3 years? It's going to require 18 letters, just 18, 15% of the Tory party. The Tory party is so small now. Literally, 18 people writing to the 22 chairman will trigger a vote of confidence. You had 2/3 of the party, at least 65 by my counting, MPs against you. This psychodrama is just going to continue on and on and on, isn't it?
It's got to end, Harry. It's got to end. We have to heal the party. That requires somebody, I think, with leadership skills to do that. I've served as a minister in the governments of each of the last 5 Conservative Prime Ministers. I can work with people. I can build a strong team. But it also requires having a clear plan. If we just put off these decisions for the months and years to come, that's going to be a recipe for further infighting and division. And that is existential for our party, because we have reform snapping our heels. All the polling shows that I am the best placed person to bring those reform voters back. In fact, the polling suggests that I'm best placed to win over the Labour voters, the Lib Dem voters and the reform voters.
There's been lots of polls floating around in the last few weeks that say that about lots of candidates.
You need a leader who's capable of doing that and doing it with seriousness of purpose.
And as your critics say, just being a pale imitation of and dressing up in, well, not necessarily Nigel Farage's clothes. You're actually more in David Cameron's clothes today, but you're not exactly in mustard cause. But by shadowing Farage of just being a sort of pale imitation, why not just vote Farage?
Well, firstly, the reason Nigel Farage is saying those things is because he's rattled. He is worried.
Is he?
He is worried.
Doesn't look that rattled.
Well, he's talking about me a lot. And he's worried that having a leader of the Conservative Party with my track record and with the policies and agenda that I stand for will be very difficult for them. It will make them redundant because we'll suck the oxygen away from them. And we will be the serious party that is intent on securing our borders, tackling crime, strong defences, the things that reform voters care about. But also, the polling suggests that in addition to that, bringing home those reform voters back to their natural home, the Conservative Party,
Is it the natural home?
I am best placed to bring back the Lib Dem and the Labour voters. And that is what's important, because we've got to be that broad church. We've got to get back into government.
Isn't the problem,
that means bringing people back from all over the political spectrum.
Isn't the problem, though, that you're going to spend the next couple of weeks yelling about the ECHR and arguing about migration, as the last few weeks have been, and meanwhile, Rachel Reeves, Keir Starmer are basically wrestling the mantra of, growth, of economic competence, and not talking about migration. I mean, but whether that's a fault or not. But are you not focusing too much on our borders and not enough on the bread and butter issues that
Harry,
Conservatives
even in this conversation, Harry, I've been talking about all 3 of those things. Whoever you are in this country, whoever you vote for, Lib Dems, Labour, Reform, Conservative, didn't vote at all. The 3 biggest issues are the economy, the NHS and immigration. So right from the start, and more than any other candidate, I've been talking about specific ideas of how we can fix those things. If you look at the NHS, I've been publishing ideas where we empower the good managers. We weed out the bad ones. We do for our hospitals what we did for our schools. I want to ensure with the economy that we have a fundamentally different energy policy to the one that Ed Miliband is going to be pursuing. I don't want to cut emissions on the back of working people by further deindustrialising our country. So I have very clear plans as to how we take these things forward. That's how we regain the trust and the confidence of the British people.
Are you concerned, though, that, frankly, the British public aren't listening? They'd like the Conservative Party to go and have a long cold bath, and you know, they don't want detailed policies. They want to see some level of competence. And as it stands, you know, this bickering doesn't look like it's going to go away.
Well, I don't pretend this is going to be easy. You know, I think that we failed to deliver on some big issues. We've got to begin by being honest about that, being painfully honest. I've done that. That's not always been easy. You know, if you go and tell the party some hard truths, that can be tough, but I've done that because we've got to repent for the mistakes that we've made and then slowly begin to rebuild people's trust. And it begins by being an effective opposition, not a Twitter account, but by being very clear in the chamber of the House of Commons when the budget happens later this month, you know, out in the country, being clear about why this is a failing Labour government, the mistakes they're making, how we would be different.
But you've got 120 MPs, you've barely got enough people to staff every single job. Lots of those people fundamentally disagree with you. You're going to have to seriously break some eggs to even make half an omelette.
Well, look, I'm prepared to be radical.
You're going to break some eggs.
The policies that I'm putting forward are robust ones, but there need to be, because I think this country faces huge challenges. I think we have to be fundamentally different. I don't want this country to just have more managed decline. I want to arrest that and get us back into a better shape. I want to get the economy growing again. I do want a small state that works, not the big one that keeps failing. I want to tackle migration and secure our borders. That will require a different approach. I stand for change. I don't want the party just to do more of the same. But I believe we can also heal the party and bring people together if we have a very clear plan and the right leader to execute.
Last question. What job would you give Kemi Badenoch?
I have a lot of respect for Kemi, so if I was lucky enough to win, of course I'd like to work with her.
James Cleverly?
Absolutely.
All the leadership contenders?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sort of Braverman? What would you give her a job?
I think you've got to get the best players onto the Conservative Party pitch right now.
You stole all her supporters, and you're now the sort of, well, trying to be the standard bearer for the right. Was there room for Suella, a comeback?
I like Suella. We're old friends. The important thing is this: the Conservative Party is in a hole. We've got to get all the best players onto the pitch. I want to work with them. I want it to be a government or an opposition of all the talents defined by meritocracy. That's the way I would lead the party.
Be a brave leader of the opposition that brought Boris Johnson back into the shadow cabinet, I would hasten a guess. Robert Jenrick, nice to see you as ever. Thank you for coming on Never Mind The Ballots. Come and see us again soon.
Thank you.
Cheers. Right, don't go away. Plenty more coming up. Joining me now is Gwaine Towler, a man that lots of people have never heard of, but is incredibly famous for Westminster. Long-time Farage ally. He was until recently, the Director of Communications of the Reform Party. Gwaine Towler.
Good morning, good morning.
You're no longer the Director of Communications of the Reform Party.
I am no longer the Director of the Reform Party.
Has there been a coup?
There has been no coup. I am merely, I have a different approach to doing things than the current system, and that's fair enough. I've been doing it for 20-odd years, so maybe it is time for change.
No, that's what I want to get into. You are, lots of people at home probably would not have heard from you.
Widely.
Not have seen
very,
you.
Very widely.
You're very rarely on camera, but you're always just slightly
over there.
out of there. For as long as sort of Nigel Farage has been a phenomenon in Westminster that I can remember, and the wider country, you've been at his side. What has it been like?
It's
basically
been
going from a kind of a fringe movement, really, in the late 90s to the most powerful politician in...
Let's think. The first time we met is when you were a student blogger running something with a teddy bear.
Well, let's not dwell on that too
So it's quite a long time ago.
Yes.
No, it's been a ride, let's be honest. It has been extraordinary. When I first started working with Nigel was back in 2004, I think, and where he sort of grabbed me in a pub and said, "You're a Eurosceptic, you're a journalist, you take the rip.
Yeah.
Would you do it for me?" And he offered me, as a European civil servant, a Eurocrat, something like 3 times what I was earning as a freelance journalist running my own magazine. So
Classic Brussels.
Yeah, it took about half an inch of a pint to say yes. I'm not so sure my wife was so keen, given that she was green, vegan, teetotal, non-smoker.
Wow. Okay.
You could see the two things, the antithesis.
Yeah.
However, she also had a decent sense of humour, so that was okay. No, it was fun. The very first thing This was just after Robert Kilroy Silk had exploded in a puff of vanity.
Right, yes.
And
Veritas, I think it was.
Vanitas.
Vanitas, very good.
Is what we called it. But the point being, at that time, in the national polling, UKIP was on about 2%.
Yeah.
There's these ideas that Farage and UKIP and then the Brexit Party and now Reform are a populist party. That's complete bunk. We're possibly the most unpopulist party that you've ever heard of. We were on 2% in the polls. Our issues were 5th, 6th, 7th on the list of things that bother people at night. However, I saw in Nigel somebody that I had a very close simpatico with. He believed very strongly in that which he believes in. He didn't really care who agreed with him or not. He just felt the need to do what he believed was right. And because of that lack of the need for people to like him, over a period of time, a long period of time, he was able to show that level of authenticity, that even people who don't like him, there is a level of respect.
Yeah.
And he was never a hypocrite. The British people are perfectly happy for people to make mistakes. They're perfectly happy for people to be wrong-headed. But what they don't like is hypocrisy.
Yeah.
And Farage has never pretended to be anything other than he is.
Is that the tricky thing now, though? Because obviously, look, he spent eight times trying to become an MP, finally got there. Now is slightly more boxed in as a member of Parliament.
I don't think he is.
You don't think he is?
No. You might have said he was boxed in as an MEP, and he certainly wasn't boxed in then. In fact, the Lib Dems particularly, he's the laziest man in British politics, he only goes to committee once or twice a year, He's probably the most hard-working man in British politics. Yes, he did not see his role as a UKIP MEP to be there, sitting in a room, regulating the size of a widget. Nobody who voted for UKIP wanted him to sit in a room regulating the size of a widget. They wanted to be out there campaigning, getting the message of British national sovereignty into the public domain.
He's obviously clearly trying to professionalise, quote,
Clearly.
Reform as an outfit.
We need it.
But is that not going to take away slightly from that sort of freewheeling Farage brand of saying what he wants, when he wants, how he wants, if you're trying to also at the same time become a sort of mainstream political party?
No matter how professional the party gets, nobody is going to turn around to Farage and say, that suit, you can't wear those mustard cords. It's just not going to work, is it? It's just not going to work. No, there's a difference. Nigel is the leader.
Yeah.
He has commissioned somebody, in the case of Azir Yousaf, to professionalise the systems, but not to change the character.
But they have changed the character if you're not still there. You're part of the Eurosceptic furniture.
I've been doing it for 20 years. I mean, that's absolutely fine. You do need new brooms. But nobody is going to put baby in a corner in the case of, Nigel. No, Nigel is not going in a corner, and he's not going to change who he is and how he responds and how he acts. And I don't think anybody who votes for reform wants him to. But you've got to remember, we went into the last election, despite the hard work of activists up and down the country, we didn't have any branches.
Yeah.
We had no fundraising system in the field. The entire campaign was based on whether our candidate could be bothered to get up in the morning and work.
And hadn't said something incredibly daft or racist in the past.
Hadn't said something incredibly daft or racist in the past. And when in October last year, the vetting system ceased to exist, and we desperately needed to get as many candidates as possible, some people, and let's be honest, about 4% of people got through who had said things that were completely beyond appeal and completely unacceptable. I don't want to be represented by racists. Nobody who votes for us wants to be represented by racists. Nigel certainly doesn't. Richard Tice didn't. However, in order that we could prove to the country at large that we had a significant amount of support, we had to stand everywhere. And that dynamic fell down in some places. We reckon we lost about 500,000 votes in the last 2 weeks because of those dodgy candidates. So it will not come as a surprise to you that virtually the first person employed post-election was a head of vetting.
There's big talk of breakthroughs in Scottish Parliament, in Wales in 26. Next year, Wales next year, Scotland 26, local elections.
Both Wales and Scotland 26.
26. Are we on the cusp of something here?
Yes.
As a country, we're about to see that 4 million votes that Reform got at the election. That is going to blow open local government.
Well, I think local government next year, we are working our socks off. We've actually, as I said, we had no branches on the 4th of July. We now have something like 350, 400. By Christmas, we'll have 450 branches.
Yeah.
That's a colossal administrative effort. Branches with interim chairman, with treasurers, with campaign directors.
Do you feel sad you're not going to be part of that, though?
Not at all. I feel, in many ways, I can be a candid friend on the outside, talking to people like you, supporting the party out there, writing articles. So, do I need to be in the nitty-gritty? Do I need to be in the engine room? Do I need to be on the gun deck? No, not necessarily. I can be a privateer.
What about a candidate yourself? Do you fancy that?
I'd probably fail the vetting.
Why would you fail the vetting? That's the key question.
I've had a ramshackle life. But the point is...
You don't feel slightly hurt by Nigel, who you've always stood by for 20
I get
years?
it. I get it. I want the party to succeed. And I understand if you give somebody the role of sorting that aspect out, the administrative side, the paperclips. I'm just an expensive paperclip.
Right.
And you need to have paperclips that suit the time. And so I don't have a big problem with it at all. I get it. I wanted to stand down probably after the Scots and Welsh election.
Right.
I didn't. This is not a job for life, though it feels like it at times.
I'm sure.
And this is not the first time I've been fired by what I call the tribe.
Well, exactly. I mean, I was going to say, you've been in the wilderness before and you've come back. Is there a Gawain comeback?
I don't think it's something I'm looking to.
But Nigel Farage sat in that very seat where you're sitting not long ago and said he could be Prime Minister in 2030. Do you think that's...
I don't think it's completely out of the question, no. I think downhill following wind, this government being the catastrophic chaos disaster that's seemed to be so far, a Tory party split, whoever wins is not... As we discussed before, the camera turned on. Whoever wins is not going to have the majority of the Conservative parliamentary party behind them. And in the case of Jenrick, maybe he had a Damascene conversion in the Home Office, a strange place to have it, but OK. Maybe he did. But he moves his arms around like a fairground ride, but he also, I don't think people actually believe all the new positions he takes.
But on the policy, though, who is the biggest threat to reform, Badenoch or Jenrick?
I don't think either are particularly. They each have their threats, but they each have their weaknesses. And I think in the case of Badenoch, you have. One, her parliamentary party, none of them trust her. We know she leaks. We know she stabs people in the back. We know she does them over.
She's not here to defend herself on
She's
that one,
not,
but
of course.
your opinion, not mine. Yeah.
OK, it is generally considered that she leaks. It's going to be considered she's a backstabber. I mean, there were the leaks out of cabinet, there were leaks out of shadow cabinet and all the rest of it. I don't think there's a great deal of trust, but she does seem to have an ideological basis for where she actually...
Yeah, she's a gut instinct right winger. No one can deny that.
And I think that she'll cause the Labour Party much more trouble than she'll cause us. But I do not think those people sitting in a room with her in Westminster, her colleagues, are going to be comfortable.
Yeah.
Because they don't know what she's going to do.
Do you think there's room at any point for a reform deal with either one of those people?
The Reform weren't interested in a deal.
Well, they were interested in a deal in 2019, weren't they?
No,
the Brexit Party.
We were absolutely not interested in a deal. We just felt we had to do something to stop the possibility of a Corbyn, a Corbyn Sturgeon and that woman from Dumbarton, Jo Swinson.
There we go.
There was a 20% possibility they could win. We could not allow that to happen.
I interviewed Boris Johnson this week. He said there was no deal. There was no offer to Nigel Farage of any incitement to stand down. Is that how you remember it back in 2019? Because I think Nigel thinks he welched on the deal, right?
There were definitely conversations, but maybe not at that level, maybe at this level. We waited until there was one statement on a YouTube publicity thing that Boris did that made the difference. There was a promise made. Honestly, I've forgotten what that promise was. Because that wasn't what I was doing at the time. But there was that, and therefore there was that decision, and Farage went up to Hartlepool and stood on the platform and said, we're going to pull.
But never again.
No, a couple of reasons. One, there was no deal on a piece of paper. There's no way that Boris would be so stupid. Well, maybe. But no, there was no way Boris would be so stupid as to do that. And the Conservative Party do have a level of entitlement. They think that they own people's votes. And so therefore, just because the Brexit Party stood down in all seats facing Tories as sitting MPs. The Tory party believes that we should have done it anyhow. In fact, they spend an awful lot of effort, particularly through the mail, trying to persuade all of our candidates to stand
Well, there's
down.
an argument, though, that reform, if there had been some sort of pact or deal before the election this year, you wouldn't have, this whopping great Labour majority that has basically the ability to unpick Brexit in any way they want.
Why would we have done a deal with a party that has betrayed its own base time and time again? Why would we do a deal with a party that we stood down in order to famously get Brexit done?
Yeah.
And within a couple of months, Boris had done nothing. He'd okayed and the rubber stamped Theresa May's deal. The withdrawal agreement that he signed up to was exactly what she signed up to.
Yeah.
There was no change. And essentially, the famous there's going to be no border down the Irish Sea. Damn right there is.
Yeah.
He betrayed everything that he presented in that election, let alone us. Betraying the Brexit Party, who cares? Betraying the 17 million people who voted for Brexit, that's a much more serious issue.
So no deal, no Gwaine Towler comeback.
Absolutely not. No.
And Nigel Farage could be Prime Minister really in 2030?
Downhill following wind, depending on what I'm trying to use my words properly, the effectiveness of this current Labour government. I think that you already see in the polls, you already see the switch is not back to the Tories, but the switch from Labour, the buyer's remorse, their remorse is coming our way, which is why places like Wales and Scotland are so important, because those are much more natural Labour territories than they are Tory territories in the last 60 years. You've got a government in Wales, in Cardiff, who has been able, just as Westminster was able to point the finger at Brussels, say, not our fault, Gov, it's them.
Point the finger at Westminster.
Labour in Cardiff Bay, in the Senate, have been pointing at the Tories in Westminster for years, and they can't blame London anymore. It's their own responsibility, their own cancer rates in the NHS, their own 20-mile-an-hour zones, their own failure with the agricultural community.
I think you're sounding like a candidate. Maybe you should stay in Wales.
Nah, I'm having too much fun.
Gwaine Towler, come and see us again soon.
I will.
Thank you for coming on Never Mind The Ballots debut.
Indeed, thank you very much.
Cheers.
Have fun.
With the US election now only weeks away, it is still too tight to call. Both candidates neck and neck in the polls. To discuss all that, joining me now is Lindy Lee, a Democrat strategist, and Greg Swinson from Republicans Overseas UK. Lindy, the Harris mania we sort of saw when she finally eased Joe Biden out of being the candidate has subsided somewhat, and it feels to me the more voters see her, the more worried the Democrats are getting. Are you a bit of buyer's remorse yet?
I actually think it's quite the opposite. First of all, thank you so much for having me.
Not at all,
I
welcome.
think the more the voters see her, the more they like her. And in terms of the polls inching ever so closer, this is just the way that American elections are. As we draw closer to election days, polls will tighten because that's just the way things are in American electoral politics. We are an election of margins. It's all about turnout at this point. And the last 100,000 people to make up their minds in America, they're going to decide who's going to be in the White House.
And are you confident that Kamala's the best candidate you could possibly have? She does seem to be on a somewhat tight leash at the moment. I mean, the interviews she's doing don't seem to be, that hostile. I mean, she's speaking to a friendly crowd, and even then she's getting in a bit of trouble. Is she really up to the job?
I just want to say that I haven't seen this level of exuberance, this level of excitement since I was a kid. In 2008, rooting for Senator Barack Obama. And I was at the convention. I was actually one of the credentialed, it was the first time that they credentialed influencers. So I was there and also as a member of the Pennsylvania delegation. The excitement in the room was absolutely electrifying. I wish I could convey that to you now. And the energy right now translated into $1 billion raised just since Joe Biden dropped out on July 21st. This is the first time in American history that a candidate was able to raise that much money in such a short amount of time.
Greg, Donald Trump said no rematch, no second debate. He's done. Why is he chicken? He looks a bit frit, doesn't he?
Yeah, I don't think President Trump is great at debating. I think so. It's probably the right tactical move. You have a bit of a, I'll call it politely a bias by the moderators. He definitely would have done one on Fox where, I would admit the bias would be the other way, but I think they run better debates at Fox, or at least historically they have. So I don't really blame him. You know, he's not. I thought J.D. Vance did a much better job. I wish there was another Vance Waltz debate, frankly, because I think J.D. is better at articulating the message and obviously a better debater and a better speaker. So yeah, I think, Trump didn't really have to do much in the June 27th debate. He just had to let Biden, crash and burn. I think Kamala didn't have to do much in their debate with Trump because, Trump kind of, went off script and she got under his skin, and he kind of basically gave the debate to her. So I think it's probably the right move tactically.
You were shaking your head there, Lindy. You didn't think much of the Waltz JD Vance showdown?
Well, I have 2 points to make respectfully. First off, her name is Kamala Harris.
Sorry, I always get told off. I know, I'm sorry.
She's been in this race since, it's been almost 3 months now. The least we can do is get her name right. I know
Noted.
Republicans know how. You guys are intelligent. You know how to say her name. Her name is Kamala Harris. That's point number one. Point number two.
Fair enough.
What J.D. Vance delivered on the debate stage wasn't anything close to a good performance. It was polished falsehoods. He's very good at lying. I'll give him that. And I have people who went to Yale Law School with him. He is 180 degrees from who he was. He's a chameleon who will say absolutely anything he needs to say to get elected. He's on the record not once, not twice, but many, many times denouncing Donald Trump. And he changed his mind supposedly because he realized that MAGA was the only game in town and he had to get on board in order to accrue power.
Greg, chameleon, is that fair?
Well, I think it's fair for a lot of politicians. Yes, did he change his views on Trump? A lot of people have, and I think, if you look around, my crowd here in the UK, a lot of people were, I wouldn't say never Trumpers, but very skeptical of Trump back in 2016. And to say that MAGA is the only game, I don't agree with that. I just think that it's the party of the big tent. You have to sort of reach out to all the different silos or all the different factions. So I don't think we could win without the populist wing of the party. And I think, I think we also embrace the sort of traditional conservative element. We were very suspicious of Trump in 2017. I didn't think he would govern like a conservative, and I turned out to be wrong. I thought he was going to be purely in the populist lane. He basically governed with like textbook Reagan, conservative principles, tax reform, deregulation, so it kind of worked. And so I think for JD to come on board is probably not unusual in the Republican Party. And I could say the same for myself.
I wanted to ask you both about something Tim Waltz has said this week about essentially changing the rules of abolishing the Electoral College and having a different system for electing the president. Lindy, it feels like, Harris is going to win the popular vote. I don't think, all the polls are indicating that. Yeah. But it's much tighter, obviously, in the crucial swing states. Isn't this just ripping up the rules because you don't like how it's going?
Republicans always attack something called DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. Well, you know what? The Electoral College is DEI for Republicans. Because you know what? Right-wingers understand that they will never, ever win another election again if it weren't for the Electoral College. They need that affirmative action in order to win the White House. And I just want to say, my fellow guests here, my esteemed guests, laid out a number of agenda items that Trump espoused. He failed to mention one thing, though, and that was terrorizing our Capitol. Yeah, he did that on January 6th. His thugs assaulted 140 Capitol Police, and that's disqualifying. Okay, no amount of tax cuts can ever compensate for the destruction of everything that Americans hold dear.
Greg, 2 points. The legacy issue of January 6th and your views on the Electoral College when you've got after that, please.
Yeah, look, Jan 6 is not a bright day for America, especially for Republicans, and I think that, that's not something that we want to lead with, obviously, but also it's not really a top issue for Americans. There are a lot of people who basically won't vote for Trump. I think it'll cost them 5 or 10 points amongst Republicans because of that. But it's something that Democrats are trying their best, especially back in the midterms, to really lean on that day and place the blame on Trump. That's debatable. Peacefully and patriotically is how he described, or how he advised them to behave. So, look, it's, again, not a great moment at all. And I think it was disgraceful. But People care about the economy and inflation. People care about the border crisis. So that's why, you know, the Democrats can try their best to push up Jan 6 as a top issue, but it's just not, according to the polls. But back to the Electoral College, yeah. Look, it was designed to protect the minority, you know, and, you know, I guess there was the old Tocqueville line, you know, beware the tyranny of the majority. You know, it was quite deliberate. Now, yeah, everybody's guilty of liking the rules when they work for them and then not when it doesn't work. Now, we were very unhappy when the Senate, I gotta try to remember his name, Lindy, maybe you can help me, from Nevada, who was the Senate Majority Leader, when they changed the rules. Thank you, I appreciate it. When he changed the rules on the filibuster for judges, and I thought that was a mistake. And I remember the Republicans saying, well, you know, you'll probably regret it. And sure enough, you know, a term or two later, we got a conservative Supreme Court because we only needed 51 votes in the Senate, whereas prior to that, you needed 60. So, you know, I think the rules, the traditions are great. They work. They serve a purpose in protecting the minority. I think that Republicans can win the popular vote. We haven't, you know, the last time we did was 2004. But prior to Biden being kicked to the curb, Trump was going to win the popular vote, according to the polls in early July. So, you know, that's a really good point. I wish we could win the popular vote, but the system's there for a reason, whether it's the filibuster, whether it's the Electoral College, you know, and that protects minorities. And I think if we had the popular vote and put in some kind of crazy, you know, legislation, the Democrats would regret it if it only took the majority. So I think that, you know, it's there for a reason. It works. You know, we could compare it to other systems. The UK, for example, you know, arguably.
We all have our system, all our systems have their benefits and their downsides. Yeah, I would say.
Yeah, Labour government supermajority with 34% of the popular vote. So there's nothing perfect, but I think our system worked pretty well.
A final question to you both, please, and starting with Lindy. I mean, given how tight things are we actually going to get a result on election night, or is anyone actually going to concede, given that this could potentially come down to 150,000 votes in a few counties? Are we definitely going to get a result anytime soon, or are we expecting another long, sort of drawn-out process into December before we know who's actually won?
Oh, that's a really good point. I doubt that we're going to know on election day unless there's a decisive victory either way. I told myself that I wouldn't get into an argument with a Republican on air, but I just couldn't help myself. January 6th wasn't just a bad day. It was the worst day in American history. And as a naturalized immigrant, I am a proud American citizen from England also. I'm from Sheffield, okay? He desecrated everything that we hold dear. The fact that he's even a serious candidate just boggles the mind. How anyone could do this to our country is just absolutely atrocious and unacceptable. He has forfeited his right to claim to be an American. He sold us out. And just this week, we learned that he was secretly shipping advanced COVID tests to his daddy Putin in Moscow.
Sounds to me like you're suggesting that if he does win, he's still an illegitimate president.
In my mind, he will never be a legitimate president. In 2016, we had Russian election interference. This has been established. This is not a fringe theory. You're shaking your head, but we have empirical data.
There was no smoking gun in that. It was a lot of conjecture. But you know, you sound a little bit like Donald Trump saying, you know, that the 2020 election was illegitimate. Surely it's for the people to decide rather than
He filed 64 lawsuits, 63 of which he lost. The Senate has come out with many reports substantiating the fact that Russia interfered with election. And right now we have 3 countries interfering with election to this very day. China, Iran, or Russia. They're still meddling with us.
Greg,
foreign interference in elections is not a conspiracy. It's happening right now.
Greg, an illegitimate president. Are we going to see scenes like January the 6th again if it's close?
Yeah, I hope not. And remember that, you know, nobody wants interference in the elections from foreign countries. You know, we have Iran, China, and Russia that are in fact meddling. It turns out it wasn't a cooperation between Trump and Russia. The Russia collusion hoax has been debunked. it turns out it came from the Hillary Clinton campaign, much like the 51 intelligence officers that claimed the Hunter Biden laptop was, Russian disinformation. That came from the Biden campaign. It came directly from Anthony Blinken, who's now the Secretary of State. So look, none of these things are helpful. I don't think election denying was a good political move in 2022. It really hurt us in the midterms. So it's not something I would run on. I didn't like it when Hillary did it in 2016 and said he was an illegitimate president. I didn't like it when
Respectfully, this isn't a fringe theory. Mitch McConnell's aide was literally indicted for funneling money to the Trump campaign. Look it up. This literally happened. Just a couple weeks ago, Attorney General Merrick Garland indicted a company for accepting $10 million. This is reality. I function in reality zone. I don't know where you are, though.
Go on, Greg, come back to that.
I think it's better to back away from the Russia collusion hoax because it's been debunked. So if you want to say there's interference from foreign,
by the way, a minute ago,
from foreign countries,
like an indictment from the United States Justice Department, Merrick Garland, this happened. Tenant Media, maybe you heard about that, and how Russia funneled $10 million to these right-wing influencers. This isn't me making it up. It literally happened. I don't know how else to articulate myself for you to understand, but it happened.
Greg, I can't keep up with you. You're way.
I know you can't because I'm dealing in facts.
Lindy, let Greg at least have a crack at that though.
Yeah, Harry, what was the other part of the question?
Will we see scenes? Will we get a result on election night? Are we looking at scenes of January the 6th style protests?
No,
if it's close.
I hope we don't see that. I hope we don't have the Women's March the next day denying the election. I hope we don't have Trump arguing that the election was illegitimate. It's not a good move for either party. I hope we don't see that. As far as election day, no, I don't think we'll have the results. Specifically in Pennsylvania, they start counting the mail-in ballots on election night, and they can take mail-in ballots for 7 days as long as they're time-stamped before election day or on or before election day. So if it comes down to Pennsylvania, I think we have to wait 7 days. If Trump can win the Sun Belt and either Michigan or Wisconsin, then it makes Pennsylvania irrelevant. So, if he can surprise and win one of those other two Midwestern states and keep the Sun Belt, then we'll have an election day result. If not, we wait 7 days for Pennsylvania.
Lindy, final thought. Confident that Farage is going to do it, or starting to get worried? Look, some of your Democrat colleagues are sort of making noises that it's not going as well as they might have hoped.
Well, after 2016, we will all become professional hand wringers. It's just what we do. We're expert at it.
Very good.
We say it again and again. I'm going to see her this weekend. We say again, we are the underdogs. We're going to run like we're 10 points behind.
Well, you're not the underdogs if you're outspending Trump, are you? You're not the underdogs in terms of money.
It doesn't matter. We are the underdogs. She is a historically unique candidate, and I'm not going to underestimate the force of the bigots and those billionaires who want their tax cuts. There's some Americans who will put aside any qualms they have in order to secure their tax cuts, because Trump's multi-trillion-dollar tax cut, guess what's going to happen? It's about to expire, and they want it to continue. All
right, Greg, final thought. Trump going to do it?
I think he can. I can't promise that he will. It's so super close right now. It's basically, Trump leading on the issues, the number 1 and 2 issues, which are inflation in the economy, number 1, the border crisis, number 2. He's polling anywhere from 5 to 15 over Vice President Harris in those metrics. So if he's able to stick to the issues, he wins. If he gets distracted with the personal, then he runs the risk of annoying swing voters. The second thing is the Democrats really embraced mail-in voting in 2020 and 2022, and they're better at it. They're better at ballot harvesting. The Republicans are playing catch up on that. So even if Trump wins on the
you're
issue,
literally a conspiracy theorist.
I think we're going to let's leave it there then before we start into down another rabbit hole. Go on very quickly, Greg. We're going to go.
We're playing catch up. We're playing catch up on the ballot harvesting. We're trying to do it. And the Democrats did it very well in 20. They did it very well in 2022.
I'm sorry for
guys,
you
we're gonna
that
have
you
to
succumb
call-
to these just lies.
We made
I'm
a
We'll have
sorry.
to
big
call
mistake
time.
by
We'll have to call
engaging.
time there. Thank you both, Lindy, Greg.
Thanks,
This
Harry.
debate, I'm sure, will rage on. Thank you to all my guests for joining me. Robert Jenrick, Grain Haller. This was Never Mind The Ballots. Look out for Boris Johnson being interviewed by The Sun on Monday. YouTube.com @SunPolitics. Watch it all. Thank you very much. Goodbye.